Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. It's all rain and no shine this week across the country. Warm tropical air sitting north of New Zealand has brought with it thunderstorms and rain warnings for Northland, Auckland, Great Barrier Island and the Coromandel Peninsula. Crews have already been working on clearing slips along State Highway 2 between Ōpōtiki and Gisborne. So what is the outlook for this week? And when will Mother Nature give us all a break? Today on the front page, Niwa principal scientist Chris Brandolino is with us to take us through what to expect and when we might be able to put the sheets on the line. First off, Chris, what is driving this stormy weather New Zealand is experiencing at the moment?
Moisture. We're getting tropical moisture. There's a tropical low well to our north, over north and west of New Caledonia in the tropics, right? And that is going to move south, that low. It's disorganized, but what it has with it is a lot of moisture from the tropics. Now, separate to that, there's another low. There's a separate low over the Tasman Sea. So the two are going to work together to provide us this really wet period. We've already seen the rain and the wind, but that's really going to increase and should reach its apex sometime during the day on Thursday or Wednesday, I beg your pardon, perhaps even into early Thursday for some.
Right. So how's it looking at for the rest of the week for the country?
Yeah, so look, I think going kind of step by step. So when we're trying to understand what's going to happen with the weather, in this case, let's say rainfall, what we're doing is we're looking at modeling. So modeling tries to tell us, meteorologists, what the atmosphere is going to be like in a day, an hour, and a week. So we can actually look at what's called scenarios. So we have in-house this model called New Zealand Ensemble System. There's 18 scenarios, and we can look at those scenarios and try to understand what are the outcomes that are on the table? What are the possibilities to consider? And if those 18 outcomes start to look more similar than dissimilar, that gives us some confidence that what is being shown or what is most likely to happen will happen. And then we can take those 18 outcomes and we can say, right, here is a kind of a low-end scenario. We'll call it a dry scenario. And here is the middle-of-the-road scenario. And here is a wet scenario, kind of a worst-case scenario. So you can look at three scenarios, and that's really helpful because it gives people an idea, well, if things got really gnarly and nasty, what could that look like? Or, hey, what if things actually settled down and wasn't so bad maybe as the worst-case scenario, kind of a low-end scenario? What does that look like? And when you look at that sort of middle-of-the-road scenario or the higher-end scenario, places like the Coromandel, places like Eastern Northland, places like Bay of Plenty, Tairāwhiti, Gisborne, those areas have the highest risk for seeing some really heavy rainfall. We're talking 100 to maybe even 200 millimeters of rain in a pretty short period of time. In Northland, as you know, we had the flooding over the weekend on Sunday. So the concern there is that you already had flooding. Now you're going to get more rain. That could be kind of that unfortunately could be a situation where flooding occurs when normally it wouldn't, simply because the ground is so wet.
Is that a recipe for slips as well?
It is, exactly, yeah. So oftentimes when the ground becomes really saturated, it becomes quite heavy and things could peel off and you get things falling from side to cliffs and higher elevation. So that's a really good point. Yeah, things like landslips, those kind of go part and parcel with the heavy rainfall. And with that heavy rainfall, the risk of flooding obviously becomes a real concern, as I mentioned. So we can look at where the potential of river flooding is most likely. So if you take the rainfall forecast and assuming that's reasonably accurate, it's not way off, you can then put it into a river flow model and say, right, where are the flows likely to be, say, above average or extremely high? And when you get into that extremely high category, that is where river flooding becomes most likely. So places like Northland, the Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, those are the areas worth watching for the river flooding. Other areas, I'm sure, are candidates, but in terms of the highest risk, likely in those areas. And that's where Met Service, our friends at Met Service, that's where they have those weather warnings. So obviously you want to stay on top of the warnings because those are the areas that are going to be of greatest risk for significant impacts, such as the rain, but also the wind. Wind coming from the east, that's kind of an unusual wind direction. You combine an unusual wind direction with an extended period. We're talking 12, 24 hours of wind gusts of 60, 70. And during the day on Wednesday, it could approach 80, 90, or 100 kilometers per hour. On wet soils, that does increase or elevate the odds for things like tree damage and power cuts. And we've already seen some of that.
In terms of when we should see the worst of it and when we should be on the other side of it, is it really looking at Wednesday or tomorrow here?
I think by Thursday morning, we'll start to see some significant improvement for probably much of the country, much of the North Island. Keep in mind, this is chiefly a North Island event. It is worth watching as I look at some of the maps here. We'll have to keep an eye on the eastern South Island. It is possible that they could see some heavy rain later on Thursday. So it's worth mentioning that. But I think once we get into Thursday afternoon, we will start to see certainly the rain go away. It's probably going to remain a bit blustery, probably, unfortunately, for much of Thursday. I know we have a long weekend coming up for the Upper North Island Auckland anniversary, and people are hoping for some good weather. Unfortunately, that doesn't look to be the case, but we can maybe bookmark that and circle back to that if you want in a minute or two. But regarding this weather right now or the upcoming weather, I really think it's Wednesday into Wednesday night into early Thursday with the top of the country, i.e. Northland, getting the worst weather first, and areas like Bay of Plenty, Ōpōtiki, Gisborne, that coming a bit later. But that also means Northland will likely see some improvement earlier because their weather will go downhill earlier as well.
No, Chris, I wanted to talk about anniversary weekend now.
I thought you did.
I mean, I suppose a lot of people have those bad memories from the anniversary day floods, Cyclone Gabrielle. Yeah. I mean, is this just what we're having to get used to at this time of year? As
we all know, bad weather happens all the time. You know, when I say all the time, I mean, it isn't like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen this in 5 years. Bad weather happens, it's part of life. But what I can say is that when we get these big events, these higher end events, it is congruent with our expectations of a warming climate. What do I mean by that? When our planet, our temperature warms, what that does is that when you take a big weather event, which has always happened, but what climate change does, it makes three things. It makes the big weather event or the extreme weather event, A, more likely to happen. B, it makes those events more frequent. And C, it makes those big weather or extreme weather events more, extreme. So that is what is happening. And so when we get these weather events, if this same weather event were to occur 50 years from now, unfortunately, it's likely to produce even bigger impacts, more rain and things like that. So big weather events have always happened, but I think because of climate change, what we're seeing is that they tend to happen more frequently. They tend to be more likely to occur. And when they do occur, they can run the risk of being even more extreme than they say were 50 years ago or 100 years ago.
When people think of summer, they think of beach days and hanging your sheets out on the line and having them dry in 5 minutes, that kind of thing. I mean, when do you think summer is over in that respect?
Oh, gosh, no. Summer is not done. We're just getting started. Now, look, we're in mid-January here, so we still have a good, 10 days before the end of January. And we got all Feb, which I know is kind of a short month. There's no mistaking that. But keep in mind, here is the good thing about being an island nation. We're surrounded by water, right? Here's the good thing. Our ocean temperatures reach their apex, reach their highest, typically in about early mid-February. Well, why is that a big deal? Because that helps to keep us warmer a bit longer. So as we go into March, our ocean temperatures are really quite warm still. They're coming off, they're not too far removed from when they're at their highest. And as a consequence, that has an upward influence on our air temperatures. What am I saying? March can often be an extension of summer. Yeah, the days are a bit shorter, but you can get some really warm temperatures still and some really nice weather. So summer is not over. Now, it may feel like it this weekend. I'm not going to kid you there. This weekend is going to be well, how do I say this? I want to keep it polite here. It's not going to be pleasant. Saturday, look, for those, whether it's a long weekend for you or not, Saturday looks it'll feel autumnal. It's going to feel like autumn. There's going to be strong, gusty southwest winds, which is a cold wind direction. And this time of the year, when you get a chilly air in the middle of summer, the sun angle is still quite strong, as we know. That creates an environment where we get these really kind of gusty showers and thunderstorms. So I'm expecting on Saturday, there's going to be across much of the North Island, especially these showers, thunderstorms, maybe even some hail. That is likely to persist into Sunday as well. So it's not looking good. I think Monday, the actual anniversary, maybe we can salvage it. Maybe 1 out of 3 is okay. So if you're looking to enjoy the weekend, it's going to be chilly everywhere, unusually cool. And we're talking chilly for midsummer, okay? We're not talking like winter chill, though some may think it feels like it. I think if you're looking to find the best weather this weekend, where to go for that, it might actually be the top of the South Island or maybe the parts of Otago. They may sneak in a pretty good weekend, but those areas too are going to be chilly. Now, it won't last forever. I think as we get into next week, we're likely to see a change in the weather pattern. Things will moderate. But I do think for those who are in the South Island or maybe going to do some holiday making in the South Island, as we get toward the end of January into early February, they're likely to see some chillier days. I think the South Island is going to have days where it's chillier than usual, more of those days than, say, the North Island. And I am pretty confident if we go farther out, if you want to talk about February, I do think February is shaping up to be more of potentially a warmer month than what the last, say, 10 days of January are going to give us, i.e. that cold snap I just talked about. I do think we'll get into some warmer weather again. So the summer is not over. That is the short answer. I do think there's plenty more summer to come. But, we still have to keep our eyes to the north because anytime we get weather coming from the north, that is when we get these flooding events. That increases the odds for these flooding events. The north has all the moisture. That's all that moisture is, and that is fuel for heavy rain.
Does all of this have anything to do with La Niña?
Well done. Yeah, you've done your homework. So yes, it does.
I've spoken to you enough to know what La Niña is.
Yeah, so look, for those who don't know what La Niña is, La Niña is a climate driver. So you may be thinking, well, what the heck's a climate driver? Basically, a climate driver, when we're doing these long-range outlooks, for the next 2 months, the next 3 months, that sort of thing, what we're trying to do is, first things first, who's going to be driving Mother Nature's car? If you know who's driving Mother Nature's car, at least have a good idea, right? Then you're in good position to understand what the themes are going to be like 2 months, 3 months. Again, we're talking themes. It's not a weather forecast. And La Niña is one of them. La Niña is a climate driver. And history tells us when we have La Niña, here's what happens. We tend to get increased chances for lows coming from the north. Tick. That's what we're seeing today, tomorrow, and through early Thursday, a low coming from the north. We tend to get more easterlies. Well, we're going to be seeing that the next couple of days. Tick. It doesn't mean that happens all the time. It just means you get less of those westerly winds, which is what we typically see. You get a reduction of those, and you get an increase of easterly winds and visitors from the north. So in answer to your question, the short answer is yes, this is consistent and congruent with what we would expect with La Niña being at the steering wheel of Mother Nature's car. Now, La Niña is actually going away. It'll take some time for the weather to catch up to La Niña going away. These climate drivers tend to have a long memory. You tend to get La Niña-like weather patterns even when La Niña is officially or formally sort of in the rearview mirror or gone. So I do think we still have to keep our eyes to the north for these big weather, big rainmakers right through the autumn season. But here's a little pro tip. Here's some behind the curtain speak. As we go into winter, so we're going way out there. and into spring, so later this year, 6, 7, 8, and 9 months from now, it looks like El Nino may be coming to the party, and it looks like El Nino may be become a climate driver. What that looks like and what that means, we'll have to wait and see. But just a bit of a heads up, if that were to occur, that would obviously mean different weather patterns than what is consistent with La Niña, if that makes sense.
We'll have to speak about Nina's mate Nino later this year then.
You brush up on your Spanish.
Chris, if you had to describe this summer's weather so far, how would you describe it in a sentence?
Mixed. There's a word. I'll cut it down to one word.
One word.
Yeah, look, I know that's kind of a bit of a cop out potentially, but I mean, let's do a quick recap, okay? December was very warm. I mean, I'll just shout to my colleague Chester. Chester, what was December? December, was that unusually? That was an unusually warm month, was it? Oh, it was in the 20s. Yeah, I beg your pardon. But it was in the top 25 or top 30, whatever it was. So it was unusually warm December. So, I mean, if you like warmth, that was, that happened. We had those really hot temperatures in the eastern part of both islands with those windy conditions. And then we had, we had some pretty cold temperatures across the South Island after New Year's. So it has been mixed. Now we're dealing with this big rainfall across the country. So it has been mixed. I do think summer is not over with, as I said before. Yes, it'll feel like it this weekend for Auckland Anniversary Weekend, and it will feel like it at times for the South Island for the end of the month. But I think there's more summer to come, and I feel confident about that. Look, I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm a meteorologist, so I'm used to being wrong. But we'll see how we go.
Well, I won't pack away my beach blanket just yet.
No, don't do that. That'd be silly. You'd be missing out. There'll be some, especially for the North. I think the North Island probably, 27th warmest. My colleague Chester, thank you for that. So, when we think of 110 Decembers, 27th warmest, that means something. But look, if you're in the North Island, I think you have the best chances for seeing more persistent summer type weather, or quintessential summer like weather, if that makes sense.
Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thanks for having me. I enjoy coming on the program.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is hosted and produced by me, Chelsea Daniels. Kane Dickey is our studio operator, Richard Martin, our producer and editor, and our executive producer is Jane Yee. Follow The Front Page on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for another look beyond the headlines.